Welcome back to the $100 Army, episode 2. This week I was looking to put together my leader, the general of this undead force. Now, one of the strengths of one-page rules is the free online army builder, which allows you to build list upon list. I say this because I've built many different lists for this group of dusty bones, with many variations of the general. That said, the one that always stuck out to me was the Royal Chariot. Chariot's kinda slap in game, and it seemed like a fun way to make him a little different. On top of that, this skeleton army box from Wargames Atlantic is absolutely plugged full of options. After slapping the chariot together, I grabbed a couple of the horses from a skeleton cavalry kit that I'd previously stolen the heads from. Headless horses could be cool, but weren't exactly what I was going for. The ram heads that come on all the skeleton sprues were perfect though. For the Royal Champion himself, a regular old skelly wouldn't do. Some of the cavalry dudes are armored up, however. So with a quick bit of body and leg swapping, our champ went from sitting to standing. For once in quite a while, I opted to paint this in sub-assemblies. The chariot and horses were already going to be challenging, and this fella would be quite easy to glue down once everything was painted. All of the bony bits were painted exactly as they were in last week's video. Base coated with grunge brown, zenithal highlight of scruffulous brown, heavy dry brush of bone white, followed by a much lighter dry brush of white. Boom, easy. As I was base coating the metals with chainmail though, I determined that maybe this dude was a little too regular old skeleton. And maybe this comment from my friend Taryn influenced me a bit. I mean, this little guy does look kinda cool and leader-like, but I remembered a sculpt I had from Trent, cast by Curtis at Ramshackle Games. It's a bit weird, in the best way, but this is Jank and Flank after all. Weird is the vibe. As our proud and semi-noble undead leader, this guy obviously needed a piece of cork as a tactical rock. Then to add a little pizzazz, I cut out a couple of arms, gluing them to the base as though they were being called from the ground to fill in the ranks. Or maybe to let our fearless leader know that they're number one. Whereas every other shambling fool in this army was mostly dry brushed, I planned on hitting this dude with slightly more effort. Not hours upon hours of effort, let's not get crazy. Just a little more effort. After base coating him with grunge brown, I grabbed the paintbrush and got to work. Starting with the flesh. I wanted to give this little fella some flesh that kinda went with the rusty, oxidized theme. And maybe as a bit of a nod to the turquoise on the Tomb Kings of old, I grabbed ghost green, a very verdigris kind of color. After mixing in a small amount of the grunge brown, I began painting some sketchy lines on the flesh. This is the point in the video when I say that I don't blend. You might be tired of me saying it, but I just want everyone to know that you can paint how you want. Blending is only necessary if that's how you enjoy painting, not because you saw someone do it on the internet. I worked my way to pure ghost green over a couple of layers. Then, to add a bit of punch to the brightest highlights, I mixed in a little ice yellow. Happy with the flesh, I moved on to the armor and other metal bits that I thought should be silver-ish. My go-to recipe for this is neutral gray, then about a 50-50 mix of neutral gray and bright neutral gray, then pure bright neutral gray. Which is pretty well what I did here, with my sketchy little lines of paint. Then, to add a little extra pop to the very brightest highlights, I mixed some white into the bright neutral gray, adding it to some of the very brightest points and edges. I wanted all of the remaining bits to still be metal, but to add a little more visual interest to this little guy, I opted for something yellow. Somewhere gold or brass. Starting with a mix of dark golden brown and yellow ochre, I began sketching in the highlights. As I said, this is Trent's sculpt that's been masterfully cast by Curtis, the one-man show that is Ramshackle Games. Curtis is an absolute legend of a human, hand-casting sculpts from loads of small, independent creators. I've linked the website in the description below, and I encourage you to check it out. There's absolutely nothing in it for me, but independent creators really are the backbone of our weird little niche. and I like to support them whenever I can. Hopefully, you do as well. Finally, I wanted to add something special to the shield. My first shield freehand? Why not? I started sketching on the same skull shape as the banner from the first episode in this series. The first attempt was a little small though, so after covering it up with grunge brown, I redid it, just a bit bigger. Proof to not be afraid, it's just paint. Go ahead and screw up. With the skull outlined, I went back in with some browns, refining the shape a bit, and adding some volume. I think the result's pretty decent and adds some real nice personality. With colors slapped across all this model, it was time to do the base. Before I did that though, I figured I should finish the chariot-bound skeleton boss. For a long while, I've avoided metallic paints. I just found they didn't behave in a way I enjoyed painting, so I didn't use them. However, I grabbed a few of the metallics from Vallejo's game color range, and they're pretty alright. I say this because this is my current super fast rusted metal recipe. I grabbed chainmail and slopped it over all the metal bits on the skeleton and his chariot. I realize it's not particularly realistic for all these harness pieces to be metal rather than wood. But this is a skeleton-driven, skeletal horse-led chariot. I think realism went out the window a while back. Once everything is covered in chainmail and dry, I'll dilute grunge brown, my current favorite rusty paint, and dilute it down to a thin wash consistency, slopping it all over the metal areas. I would say to not be afraid of overthinning the paint. You can always add more than one layer, and if you quickly wipe the wash off of the high points while it's still wet, you really don't need to go back in with a highlight later. Obviously, there are some great rust products on the market, but we don't need to overcomplicate things. This is a quick and fairly effective technique, great for when you're painting a large number of minis. Glue our rider to the chariot, slop our usual water and pigment powder wash across the bases, and we've got a couple of badass skelly leaders. So here they are. Using this miscast mini puts me over $100 army by a couple dollars. But this chariot dude is from the $90 skeleton army box, so I'm still good. Not that it really matters. If you want one of these skeleton army boxes for yourself, or any of the awesome kits from Wargames Atlantic, check them out at the link in the description. And be sure to check out all the incredible handcast minis from Ramshackle Games. Support independent creators whenever possible. Most importantly, thanks for watching. You are awesome.